Hey, how's it going? My name is Brandi, and this is Killer Bites. If this is your first time here, Killer Bites is one of the best true crime shows on the internet. Or at least that's what I like to think, but I'm a bit biased. In today's episode, I'm going to tell you about the terrible thing Charles Stewart did to his wife and unborn baby. There's a special place in hell for people like Charles Stewart. While his wife Carol was pregnant, Charles sent a bullet through her head. She was rushed to the hospital where an emergency C-section was performed to deliver their baby boy, but neither one would survive. When interviewed by the police, Charles blamed the whole thing on a non-existent black man. Isn't that so messed up? Charles and his wife Carol lived in Reading, Massachusetts. Not Pennsylvania, Massachusetts. I double-checked this. They lived in a cute little suburban neighborhood where they were loved by neighbors. The couple liked to go running and work on their garden together. Charles worked as a furrier, which is a person who sells animal furs, and he was known as a genuinely kind person. Carol was a lawyer. It was the fall of 1989, and Charles and Carol were expecting a baby boy named Christopher. At this point, they'd been married for 4 years. On October 23rd, they went to a birthing class at Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston. It seemed like they were taking all of the precautions to prepare themselves to be parents. After the birthing class, Charles and Carol got in the car to head home. But Carol would never make it there, unfortunately. A few minutes after driving away from the hospital, Charles called 911. He said, "My wife's been shot. I've been shot." The dispatcher asked for Charles's details so they could send help ASAP. Charles struggled to do so. He said, "She's still gurgling. There's a busy street up ahead. Oh man, I can't see where I am." For about 13 minutes, Charles stayed on the phone with the dispatcher while he tried to give an accurate location. Officers finally found the car, but Carol was no longer breathing. Carol had suffered a bullet wound to the head, and Charles took a blow to the stomach. So we're dealing with some serious injuries here. Before Charles was rushed to the hospital, he asked how his wife was and said they were robbed by a black man. Paramedics took Charles to the Boston City Hospital and Carol back to Brigham and Women's Hospital. Charles underwent surgery that was several hours long to repair the damage to his stomach, but he was going to survive. Carol, on the other hand, didn't have the same fate. Although she wouldn't make it, surgeons worked hard to save her son, Christopher. They performed an emergency C-section, but Carol was right around 7 months pregnant, so this would be risky. Christopher made it out alive, but since he was 2 months early, he suffered oxygen deprivation, which caused seizures. When Christopher was 17 days old, Charles decided to pull his son off of life support, which ended his life. At the end of October, a funeral was held for Carol. Charles was still in the hospital, recovering from his injuries. Since he couldn't make it to lay his wife to rest, Charles wrote a eulogy that someone read on his behalf. Charles wrote, "Good night, sweet wife, my love. God has called you to his hands, not to take you away from me or the happiness and gladness you brought me, but to bring you away from the cruelty and the violence that fills this world. My life will be more empty without you, as will the lives of our family and friends. You have brought joy and kindness to every life you've touched. Now you sleep away from me. I will never again know the feeling of your hand in mine, but I will always feel you. I miss you and I love you." So what happened in the car that day to cause this tragedy? Charles told police a black man with a raspy voice came up to them and tried to rob them. He claimed the man told him, "You're 5-0," and started firing. The only details Charles gave the police about the suspect is that he was about 6 feet tall, 30 years old, and was wearing a black sweatsuit with red stripes. But here's the thing, Charles and Carol weren't attacked by a black man. In fact, they weren't attacked by an outsider at all. Charles was the perpetrator behind the whole thing. He fired at his wife and sent a bullet to his stomach to make it look like someone else did it. This happened in the Mission Hill neighborhood, which was a racially mixed lower income area. And of course, Charles and most white people in America during the late 80s were extremely racist. So Charles made up a fake story about this violent black man who didn't even exist. But everyone believed him, and the whole town was outraged by this perpetrator's actions. Anytime a civilian saw a black man in a tracksuit, they were like, "That's the guy." Black men were terrified to leave their homes, and I don't blame them one bit. Over 100 Boston police officers were combing the streets of Mission Hill looking for the perp. They strip searched every black man they saw simply because they matched the vague description given to them by Charles. It's so messed up. The first named suspect was Alan Swanson, a homeless black man. He was pinned for the crime simply because he was black and owned a black sweatsuit. Alan was kept in police custody for 3 weeks until the police arrested a black man named Willie Bennett. Apparently, Willie's nephew jokingly said he was responsible for the crime, and Willie was an ex-con with a raspy voice, so the police just went with it. They put Willie in a lineup with a bunch of clean-cut police officers and brought Charles in. Charles, knowing damn well none of these men were responsible, pointed at Willie Bennett. And this, my friends, is how so many people, especially from the black community, are in jail for life for crimes they didn't do. On January 3rd, Charles's brother, Matthew, came forward to the police with the real story. He said Charles was responsible for firing at himself and his wife. Matthew claimed he didn't know it at the time, but he helped cover up some of the evidence. Matthew said he first thought he was aiding his brother with an insurance scam. On the night of the crime, Charles asked Matthew to meet up with him. When Matthew arrived, Charles handed Matthew a Gucci bag that contained a .38 caliber revolver and some of his and Carol's valuables, like her wedding ring and his wallet, to make it look like they were robbed. Matthew was told to drive to the Pines River Bridge in Revere, where he and his friend threw the bag over the Dizzy Bridge into the water. I guess Matthew went with this at first, probably because he was scared of his brother. Once he found out about the full crime and learned Willie was facing a false conviction, Matthew knew he had to come forward. Matthew isn't completely innocent though. He was still willing to participate in insurance fraud and was apparently going to help his brother stage a fake robbery at his house, where he initially planned to take out his wife. Anyway, in exchange for immunity, Matthew agreed to testify against Charles. But Charles didn't live to attend his own trial. The night Matthew went to the police, Charles checked into a hotel in the town of Braintree. He requested a call to be woken up at 4:30 a.m. The hotel staff did just that. Matthew then got in his brand new Nissan Maxima and headed for the Tobin Bridge. There, he turned on his hazards, opened the hood, and left a note in the front seat. In his note, Charles was talking about how he wasn't strong enough to handle the allegations of his case. He then jumped 145 feet to his demise into the Boston Harbor, which is even more proof Charles is guilty, in my opinion. The cops found Charles's car right before 7 a.m. that morning. They first thought it was a hoax, but knew it was legit when they found Charles's corpse in the water the following day. Days after Charles took his own life, several friends and family members came to the police saying Charles told them about wanting to slay his wife way before he did. And they're just now coming forward? Charles had a 27-year-old brother named Michael, who was also approached about helping carry out the crime. Same goes for Charles's close friend, David. One night in late September, David and Charles got dinner. During their meal, Charles talked about how mad he was that Carol wouldn't get an abortion, which is what he wanted. Charles also told David that Carol had the upper hand in their marriage, which he didn't like one bit. So that's when he asked David to help him slay his wife. David declined, but I guess he felt no inclination to report this to anyone. By this point, we all know Charles is guilty of the crime, but why did he do it? Money and greed. Here's a little backstory for you. In lieu of college, Charles got a job as a short order cook at an Italian restaurant. This is where he met Carol, who worked as a waitress while attending Boston College. In 1981, Charles left his cook job and started working at the fur store. In his new job, he was making more money, and when he married Carol in 1985, he was set because she was a lawyer. But then Carol got pregnant. Most people believe the main reason Charles wanted Carol to get an abortion is so she wouldn't have to take time away from work, or even worse, quit her job to become a stay-at-home mom. Because that would mean Carol wouldn't be bringing home any money. Charles would be the sole breadwinner for the family, which he didn't like, probably because he couldn't bring home enough bread. Once he was released from the hospital, he used the check he got from Carol's life insurance to buy a brand new Nissan Maxima, the one he later ditched on the bridge. He also spent $999 on a pair of diamond earrings and $250 on a gold brooch. For who? We never found out, but the police believe it was for this girl named Deborah. So Deborah was a 22-year-old intern at the first shop Charles worked at. Before Carol's passing, Charles and Deborah had apparently grabbed a few meals together. When Charles was recovering in the hospital, he and Deborah spoke on the phone quite frequently. After his release, he really tried to put on the moves, and Deborah ended things. She denied having any romantic involvement with Charles, so now we've got two motives: money and Deborah. A Harvard psychiatrist commented on the case with this statement: Mr. Stewart was an extreme example of a psychopath, an antisocial personality with little sense of remorse, a propensity to lie, and often an ability to deceive others into believing his fantasies. In the end, Charles was blamed for the crime. His brother Matthew was charged with obstruction of justice and insurance fraud. Matthew's friend John, who helped dump the evidence in the water, was charged with accessory to murder. Although Alan and Willie were later released and no one was wrongfully charged for the crime, this case left a big wound on Boston. The authorities did not handle this case well. For starters, they didn't once stop and think, it's odd that Carol was hit in the head, but Charles was hit in the stomach. And as soon as Charles said a black man committed the crime, the cops were strip searching innocent men left and right. A lot of people describe the authorities' mass search of Mission Hill as a witch hunt or a war zone. In 1995, Willie sued the Boston Police Department for violating his civil rights. He later gave this statement in an interview: "I don't trust anybody. I barely trust myself. The police falsely pinned a crime on me once, and they can do it again. I have no faith in the law enforcement, and I don't like cops. Nothing has changed. You still have those same racist cops on the police force." Carol was a loving daughter, wife, and friend who wanted nothing more than to be a mother. She was robbed of her life, and her family knew she would be appalled by what her case came to be. Because of this, Carol's founded the Carol DeMady Stewart Foundation, a program dedicated to mend race relations in Boston. It offers college scholarships to students from Mission Hill. And there you have it, the extremely twisted tale of Charles Stewart. He was a racist, money-hungry monster who committed a terrible crime and was too much of a coward to face his own consequences. Well, let me know what case you'd like us to cover next. I'm Brandi. Thanks for watching Killer Bites. I'll see you next time.